Ready-to-drink protein shakes have now officially gone mainstream, and that's very good news for Premier Protein. In this video, I'm going to be using the most recent BellRing Brands quarterly earnings report and conference call as a backdrop to discuss how the holding company's primarily biggest brand, Premier Protein, performed through the tough COVID-19 retailing environment, and also explain what that could mean to the overall active nutrition market. For those that might not be too aware of who BellRing Brands is, it is a portfolio of consumer brand, front-facing consumer brands in the active nutrition or convenient nutrition section. Primarily, the revenue comes from Premier Protein. They also have Dymatize Nutrition, Powerbar, Supreme Protein, and Joint Juice. But just to kind of start off this earnings kind of breakdown, start at the top line revenue number for you guys. In the fiscal Q3 earnings for BellRing Brands, they had a consolidated net sales of a little over $204 million, which was down 14.1% year over year. And also sequentially, it was down 20.7% on a quarter-over-quarter basis. Now, if we drill down a little bit further on the sales number by brand first, as I mentioned earlier, Premier Protein is where they primarily make up the vast majority of their revenue. That particular brand's net sales were down 11.9% in the quarter. Volumes were down 9.5%, mostly from consumer pantry depletion. If you remember from last quarter, there was a pantry loading phase. So a lot of consumers are trying to go through some of that extra inventory that they have in their homes. And then also on the go reduction, just restriction of movement is still causing some pressure on this particular brand. They did have distribution gains in all of their channels, had some positive results with new products, and had a lot of e-commerce growth that I'll talk about in a little bit. In terms of tracked channels on Nielsen, they also had an 11% dollar consumption gain. So the consumption coming from the pull from consumers was still strong, but a lot of their retail accounts were stocked up heavy in last quarter, which they're drawing down in this quarter. Dymatize Nutrition, the net sales were down 16.6% year over year. Volumes were down 22.4%. They did say e-commerce and club growth was positive, but it was offset by a very dismal global and domestic specialty channel. If you look at just Dymatize Nutrition from just the domestic side of things, they actually were up 9%. Powerbar had net sales down 44.2%. The volumes were down 45.1%. A lot of that came down to SKU rationalization globally. If we drill this down in a different way by sales by product for the quarter, you had protein RTDs, which made up 82.1%. You have powders that are 12.6%, nutrition bars are 4.6%, and then they have another category that's just 0.6%. And a lot of this on a year-over-year trend perspective, nutrition bars are way down. The only positive one is coming from protein RTD, so they're getting a lot more focused on one particular product category. Looking at this from sales by channel, this quarter you had 60% of the sales coming from club, a lot of that coming from Costco. You had food, drug, mass, 20% of the sales. E-commerce made up 9% of the sales. Specialty was 8% of the sales, and then the other category was 3% of the sales. And then if you take this by territory or just kind of US, non-US, you have 88% coming from the US in revenue, and then 12% coming from the international markets, which mentioned before, which declined sharply this quarter. Noting some of the new product performance in the market, the Cafe Latte Premier Protein SKU, that flavor continues to be somewhere around the number 2 selling SKU for Premier Protein. And they're seeing that in the top 10% of sales velocities in that category for the accounts in which they're at. And they're gaining a lot more distribution on that particular SKU. That's similar with some of the Premier Protein powder SKUs. They are also in the top 10% of SKUs in terms of sales velocity in the accounts in which they are in, and are said to be gaining extra distribution points as well. The protein and oats product from Premier Protein, that is also continuing to gain distribution points, which they're saying you're going to see some positive news come out of that particular new product SKU over the next 2 quarters. And then outside of the Premier Protein brand, they did note that the Dymatize Nutrition, co-branded with the parent company, post-holding some of their trademark, their IP with their Pebbles ISO 100 SKUs, they are saying those have quickly risen to the top 10 SKUs in the retailers in which they are offered. Now, I do want to take a little bit deeper of a dive around Premier Protein, since that is the bulk of BellRing Brands, also talking a lot around how protein RTDs are becoming more mainstream. From a sales channel point of view, within the tracked channels during the quarter, 37.5% growth in food. There was 33.2% growth in the drug channels, which are both where they're getting a lot of their distribution gains. Their biggest channels, unfortunately, were just slightly over flat, which they noted is mostly due to COVID-19 related shopping behaviors and lapping some previous year promotional schedules. A positive area for Premier Protein is around their e-commerce or digital sales, which grew 185% year over year this quarter. And if you look at this from just the trailing 12, e-commerce has grown 144.5%. The shift to digital is obviously not a new trend, but COVID-19 is accelerating that trend, and Premier Protein has done a good job at overcoming some of the beverage category constraints that has held the product category historically back within the digital channel. Now, if we look at some graphs around consumption trends and kind of what that means in terms of distribution points, there is a chunkiness to the quarterly or monthly consumption rates, but over the last 2 years, it has consistently grown if you take a longer view look at it. A lot of that chunkiness or variance from quarter to quarter or month to month comes down to shipments loading up for promotional events, and then there's a natural drawdown on inventory from a consumption standpoint. This growth in consumption trends have helped Premier Protein grow total distribution points, except for that little blip that you'll see for the supply hiccup that happened in late 2018 and into 2019. Now, there's a ton of different ways that businesses can summarize distribution gains and performance, but total distribution points is usually what I like to use. It takes into account how widely your products are available, but also how many items are available. This has led to a consistent market share growth of about 18.2% in the category currently. Now, another area that Premier Protein has been focusing a ton on is advertising. They're trying to not only get their brand in front of a bunch of new customers, but also get the liquid convenient nutrition category in front of a lot more people. So because of that, they are aggressively spending by increasing their advertising and promotional spends. And I think in this quarter, they saw about a $2 million gain in that cost category. But they mentioned experiencing significant increases in awareness, dollar share, and website traffic. But most importantly, household penetration surpassed their annual goal, increasing from 5.7% to 6.6%. Now, looking a little bit towards kind of the COVID-19 effect within the convenient nutrition category, there's kind of two particular use cases of these products. The first one is on the go, which BellRing Brands noted is definitely under indexing. A lot of people are still restricted in terms of their living. Some states still don't have their gyms open. A lot of working from home still, a lot of things going on that are putting pressure on this particular use case. Now, on the flip side, the at-home usage of these products is over-indexing. From BellRing Brands research and just category research overall, more than half of the use cases is actually at home, not on the go for the liquid convenient nutrition category. So ultimately not the worst case scenario for them, because in the liquid category of convenient nutrition, which the vast majority of BellRing Brands revenue comes from, but because of a lot of the things that are happening around COVID-19, they do have to make adjustments to reinforce and make sure they're putting the right messaging in front of customers. And during this quarter, they only saw the liquid side of their convenient nutrition portfolio down 4%, where on the flip side, if you look at nutritional bars, where the on-the-go use case a lot of that consumption was down because of the restricted living. And this category, the bar category, was down 24% during the quarter. So with some of these trends, BellRing Brands is, like I said, not all that worried. Obviously, they have to make adjustments here, and they think the blending of work, school, life, everything, kind of putting everything at home and being positioned as the leader of the category and the use cases being primarily done at home, they think they're going to pick up a lot of business during this time. But they need to make some little adjustments here, probably firstly from like the marketing side, making sure that they are focusing on content that shows the product being used at home in this new normal kind of scheduling, and just how you can kind of adapt this into that new lifestyle. Also, utilization of the products within like a cooking or an eating at home environment. And then from a product perspective, to adjust, they can kind of take this as a short and a long-term perspective. Short term, they should be looking at some packaging adjustments that they can make, or some listing adjustments online to basically call out some of those at-home features or product functionality that would work for what people are most interested in today. And then long term, from a product development standpoint, they should be looking at products that fit this new lifestyle, especially if you think it's going to extend past your product development cycle timeline and you think there's going to be some stickiness to this behavioral pattern that's happening right now. So though COVID-19 is obviously changing the risk profiles when you're creating new product development, they need to kind of stick to the plan that they've always had, especially with Premier Protein, and looking at how do you find incremental customers through incremental state needs and incremental occasions. Now, I do want to touch on a little bit around maybe potential like operational risk or just kind of the finance perspective of BellRing Brands. First of all, with the operational side of things, they did see gross margin percentage pressure, I think 450 basis points. And a lot of that came down to increase of input prices on their Premier Protein products. The milk protein side of things, the prices were increased. That was causing pressure on the margins. Also, increase in incremental promotional activity. The commodity overall of milk, it fell very fast during the start of COVID-19, but has spiked extensively over the last probably like month and a half. So that kind of draws in line with like the dry milk and just general class of milk, that those are kind of more in line now. The prices are increasing. They're expecting that input cost to increase. A lot of times when your product is tied to a commodity, you're at the whims of that commodity. And unfortunately, dry milk proteins have been increasing over the last decade or so. Outside of the input cost issues, they're not seeing any other like supply chain issues. They're not seeing any of their other kind of packaging, Tetra Pak, anything like that being an issue. And then to alleviate some of the stress on having a lot of their third-party manufacturing at one particular supplier and then utilizing one particular facility, they have added a fifth co-manufacturing facility that they've gotten going this quarter, which will add some extra capacity and flexibility. On the finance side, or balance sheet strength, to mention again, BellRing Brands is 70% still owned by the CPG giant Post Holdings. So even with maybe some of their stretches in terms of capital needs and things of that nature, they do have extra ability to tap a bigger parent company, even though I don't believe they're going to need to do any of that stuff. But it's just an option that they have over maybe some other competitors. They repaid the $65 million on the revolving credit this past quarter that they took out, which then as of June 30th has about $145 million on that revolving credit still. And then in terms of like cash and cash equivalents, I think they have somewhere around $22.5 million on their books as of June 30th. And then in terms of servicing a debt, most of that is pushed out from the spinoff that they had from Post Holdings, which I think is not due until maybe 2024. Just want to end on some final thoughts. BellRing Brands did provide some like forward-looking consumption behavior for July, saying that those numbers were up 12% year over year, but they said that the kind of tracked, untracked channel performance is similar to what they saw this quarter. So in the untracked channels, which tend to be, e-commerce, some of the smaller ones, that is up 39%, but on the tracked channels, that's about flat. Again, having some pressure. If you took a snapshot of sometime around May, the environment that BellRing Brands is operating in is very similar to what we're dealing with today at the beginning of August, there's not much difference. There are a little bit lessening of some of the restrictions in America. But if you look around, we're not over COVID-19. Everything is still a lot of uncertainty that's happening. But because they've operated in this environment over the last 3 or 4 months, they do have a little bit of an experience within this uncertain period. So if everything kind of stays similar in the next couple of months, I would expect BellRing Brands to perform a little bit better next quarter because they do have a little bit extra experience operating in this COVID-19 retailing environment.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.